Hey guys, today I had something to read while I slightly continue the building of the castle. Something to sort of tie in together exactly the idea for this. So while I might not be talking about anything in particular, you know, my plan is to narrate, I guess, while I continue to hopefully not be too distracted by narrating to build the castle. I might stream again in order to have more of a real video later on, or try doing one of my other retrospectives soonish. I don't know, that Everything and Everywhere one did so well that I find particularly surprising. People really like now. Anyways, though, wait, just 2 minutes. Let me start, I guess. So the story starts. Is it weird to be narrating a little bit? I said I was gonna do this. Fine. The third bell might be a shorter video. The bell tower of the castle rang 3 times each morning, and by the third bell, big drop, Perseus was already dressed. It was a habit long since worn, the kind of discipline that no longer felt like discipline at all. Plain shape. Wake before the first bell, dress before the second, be standing in the yard, sword belted, boots laced by the time the third bell finished its last low note, and the rooks scattered from the eastern air. He had done this so many mornings that his body no longer consulted him about it. It simply happened. The way the sun happened, the way the tide happened. He crossed the barracks corridor in the gray half-light, nodding to the 2 guards stationed at the inner door. Both straightened when they saw him. One of them, a younger man Perseus didn't yet know by name, actually squared his shoulders as though standing for inspection. "Morning, sir." Perseus. "Morning." He softened it, something like a smile, the kind he'd learned but put people at ease, rather than the kind that came naturally. "You don't need to do that, you know." "Do what, sir?" "Stand like the king's about to walk past." The young guard laughed, a little too eagerly, and Perseus let it go. He stopped trying to explain it a long time ago, that being looked at like that didn't feel like an honor, so much as a weight settling somewhere between his shoulder blades. People wanted him to be a certain kind of man, and it was easier most days to let them believe he was. The training yard was empty when he reached it, save for a groundskeeper sweeping the forest, the frost from the stone. Perseus liked the yard best at this hour. For recruits filled it with noise and effort, practicing the kind of desperate hope young men carried. They thought a sword could rewrite what they were. He walked its perimeter once out of habit, checking the state of the practice dummies, the wear on the sandbags, the tension in the rope that marked the sparring square. Everything in order. Everything the way he'd left it. He was halfway through his second circuit when he heard the door. Sebastian didn't announce himself. He never did. He simply appeared, already armored, already awake in that tightly bound way of his, as though sleep were something he tolerated rather than need. He crossed the rack of practice swords without looking at Perseus, and selected one, testing its balance with 2 efficient twists of his wrist. "You're early," Perseus said. "So are you." "I'm always early." "I know." Sebastian didn't look up. That's the annoying part. It might have been a joke once. Perseus remembered a time when it would have been. When annoying would have come with a grin instead of a flat, unreadable mouth. He chose not to reach for it. Some doors, he had learned, did not open just because you knocked politely. "Far before the recruits get here?" Perseus asked instead. "If you want to lose before breakfast." Sebastian. "Cold from the man who lost yesterday. I was tired yesterday." "You said that Tuesday, too." Sebastian's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but its shadow. And for a moment, something else almost easy passed between them. Some flicker of the boys they had once been, back when losing to each other had been the whole of their world's stakes. Then it was gone, folded away as quickly as it had come. Sebastian rolled his shoulder and stepped into the ring without another word. They fought the way they had always fought. Fast, hard, and without generosity. Perseus had long ago stopped holding back against Sebastian. Not out of respect exactly, though there was some of that too. But because Sebastian would have known instantly, and it would have cost more than the bruise saved. Steel met steel in short, ugly exchanges, no flourish to any of it. Only 2 men who had traded blows 1,000 times, finding new ways to surprise each other anyway. It ended, as it usually did, with Perseus' blade at Sebastian's throat, Sebastian's boot planted against the back of Perseus' knee. Half a second from taking them both down. "Draw," Sebastian said, breathing hard. "Draw," Perseus agreed. They separated. Sebastian wiped his brow, his forearm, and didn't offer a hand, and Perseus didn't expect one. This too was old shape. The kind of ritual 2 people kept long after the reason for it had eroded away. The ritual itself was easier than admitting what had replaced it. "You're getting slower," Sebastian said, keeping his blade. "You're getting easier to read." "I've been reading the same page for 10 years. Of course I've got it memorized." Perseus let that one sit a moment too long before answering, but there had been something underneath it. Something that wasn't entirely a joke about swordplay. He thought, not for the first time, that most of what passed between them now was like this. Sentences with a second meaning folded quietly inside the first, neither of them quite willing to unfold it the rest of the way. You're in a mood, Perseus finally said. Finally. I'm always in a mood. There. Sebastian left without another word, off towards the armory, and Perseus watched him go with the particular ache of a man standing at the edge of something, didn't know how to cross it. By the time the recruits filtered into the yard, a dozen of them this morning, yawning, half-laced, one boy still visibly regretting whatever he had to drink the night before. Perseus had folded the ache away, too, tucked beneath the same practiced ease he wore for the guard at the door. He called the recruits into formation. He corrected the two stances, praised the decent parry from a girl who flinched when he singled her out, and pretended not to notice that half the yard was watching him the way people watched something they decided long before meeting him they already loved. Sir Perseus, one of these young recruits called out. Is it true you fought 7 bandits alone on the King's Road? It was 3, Perseus said, and they weren't very good bandits. Laughter rippled through the yard, easy and warm. The kind of laughter that made a story truer than just repeating it. Perseus smiled along with it because that's what the moment wanted from him. And because it cost him nothing to give it. It never seemed to cost him anything, giving people the version of himself they wanted. That was, he sometimes thought, the strange cruelty of being liked as easily as he was. No one asked what it took to keep being likable as easily. No one thought to ask if there was a version of him underneath that felt heavier than the one they saw. He put the recruits through their drills for a better part of an hour, correcting, encouraging, occasionally stepping into the ring himself to demonstrate a stance he could have described just as well with words. It was easy work, in the way that work becomes easy once you've done it enough, that your hands know it better than your mind does. His mind, this morning, kept drifting towards Sebastian's flat mouth, towards the strange shape of a friendship that had outlived its own affection, towards a version of the two of them 10 years younger who would have not recognized what they'd become. He didn't let it show. He never did. It was nearing mid-morning when a runner from the castle found him. A boy of perhaps 12, breathless, clutching a folded parchment sealed with the king's insignia. Sir Perseus, King Baldwin requests your presence in the council chamber. Perseus took the parchment but didn't open it. He didn't have to. A summons like this delivered by a runner rather than a steward, at this hour rather than after the midday meal, meant only one thing. Something had happened that couldn't wait for the ordinary rhythms of the castle. He glanced back at the yard, at the recruits still working through their forms, at Sebastian standing near the armory door with his arms crossed, watching the runner with the same flat, unreadable expression he wore for most of things these days. Trouble? Sebastian asked, when Perseus passed him. Don't know yet. You'll tell me when you do. It wasn't a question. And it wasn't quite a request, either. It was something closer to an old habit neither of them have managed to break. The assumption worn thin, but not yet gone, that whatever came next, they would still somehow face it together. I will, Perseus said, and went to find out what kind of morning this was actually going to be. Behind him, the third bell had long since faded from the air, but its shape remained the way it always did. In the discipline of his stride, in the careful set of his shoulders, in the quiet practiced ease of a man, the whole kingdom believed had never once been afraid. They were wrong about that, of course, usually. But it was, Perseus had learned, a very convenient thing to let people believe. I'll do another one. Yeah. Only seems fair to continue the story. The Queen's Garden. Marigold's garden had no formal name, though the castle called it the Queen's Garden, as if that settled the matter. And Adeline supposed it did. It sat behind the east wing, walled in on three sides by old grey stone, and left open on the fourth to a view of a distant tree line. Open. Though from this distance, it looked like nothing more than a green smudge along the horizon. Patient and unremarkable. Adeline had spent more hours of her childhood in this garden than any hall of the castle. Still preferred it that way. She found her mother there most mornings, kneeling in the soil, with her sleeves rolled and her crown nowhere in sight. And today, no exception. You're going to ruin your hands, Adeline said, settling onto the stone bench near the moon-blossom beds. My hands have survived worse than dirt. Marigold didn't look up from the row of seedlings she was thinning. They survived you, for one. I was a delightful child. You were a menace with excellent manners. Marigold sat back on her heels and studied her daughter properly for the first time. The way she always did. Not a glance, but a real look, as though checking for something beneath the surface. You look tired. I'm not tired. You look like someone who was somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. Adeline felt the small familiar guilt rise in her chest, the one that came whenever her mother saw straight through her without seeming to try. I went for a walk towards Oakwood. It's a nice walk. It's a 3-hour walk, Adeline. In a direction the guard specifically asked you not to go alone. Marigold's tone wasn't sharp. It rarely was. He had a way of scolding that felt more like worry wearing Golding's clothes, and it was, if anything, harder to argue with than real anger would have been. You know I don't say this because I don't trust you. I know. I say it because I don't trust the forest. The forest has never once hurt. The forest, Urgold said, is not the only thing I worry about there. Adeline knew what she meant, though neither of them said the name. It hung in a space between them the way certain names did in this, spoken around rather than through. Shape everyone could see without anyone tracing its edges. He thought of Stephanie's quiet cabin at the forest border, of the easy, unpretending company she found there, of a version of herself that only existed in Oakwood's shade, unwashed and unweighed. She did not think, or tried not to think, of the other reason Oakwood pulled at her. The old ache that had nothing to do with the trees at all. I like it there, he said instead, because it was true, because it was easier than the rest. Marigold studied her for a moment longer, then let it go, the way she always eventually did. That was the shape of her mother's love. Adeline had come to understand. Not a fence, though it might have looked like one from outside, but a hand held open rather than closed. Marigold worried, Marigold asked, and then, more often than not, Marigold let her daughter choose anyway, trusting the choosing more than she trusted her own fear. Help me with these, then, Marigold said, nodding at the seedlings, since you clearly have the energy for long walks. Adeline knelt beside her without being asked twice. They worked in a companionable quiet for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. It was one of the things Adeline loved best about her mother. The silence with her never felt like distance. Baldwin's silence were different. The king's. His came wrapped in something heavier, a king's silence, full of matters he couldn't set down, even at his own table. Marigold's silences were soft edged. They left room. Your father mentioned the reports from Oakwood again this morning, Marigold said, eventually, not looking up. What reports? Hunters not returning when they should. Game behaving strangely. A few odd things nobody wants to say out loud yet. Marigold's hands paused over the soil. He's trying not to worry about it. Is he worried? Your father is always worried. He's simply very good at looking like he isn't. Marigold smiled faintly, but there was something careful behind it. It's the family talent, apparently. Adeline huffed something like a laugh, and there was real warmth in it, now unguarded. Adeline huffed something like a laugh, though it caught a little on the way out. I don't have that talent. No, Marigold agreed. And there was real warmth in it now, guarded. You wear everything you feel right out in the open. It terrifies half the court, the reason the other half loves you. He reached over and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. An old, unthinking gesture that from 100 childhoods ago. Don't lose that. His family has enough people who hide things well. Adeline didn't ask. He had learned over the years that some of her mother's sentences were doors left deliberately ajar. Not locked, but not fully open either. Waiting for Adeline to be ready to walk through them herself, rather than be pulled. She suspected, though she couldn't have said why, that this was one of those doors. Something about her parents' own younger years. Something about a version of her mother that existed before the crown, before the garden, before any of this had settled into shape it now wore. Was there something? Adeline asked carefully before father. Marigold's hands went still again just for a moment. That is a conversation for a different morning. Not a no. No, Marigold agreed, with the ghost of a smile that gave away nothing and everything at once. It isn't. Adeline let it sit, because pressing rarely worked with her mother, and she had learned, slowly, painfully, the difference between patience and giving up. She thought instead about how strange it was sometimes. She realized that the people who raised you had entire lives before you existed. Griefs and choices and roads not taken, folded away neatly enough that a child could grow up never guessing at their shape. He wondered whether Sebastian's history and hers would someday be a door like that too. Something spoken around at royal breakfast. Something spoken around at royal breakfast by children who hadn't been born yet. The thought settled somewhere heavy in her chest, and she pushed it back down into the soil with the seedlings. They were interrupted, as they often were, by the sounds of boots on the garden path. Quick, familiar, unmistakably impatient with the pace of walking itself. "There you are," Baldwin said, appearing at the archway with the particular exhaustion of a man who had already had 3 conversations that morning he hadn't wanted to have. He softened, seeing them both kneeling in the dirt. "Both of you, of course." "Good morning to you, too." "Good morning to you, too," Marigold said. "I need 5 minutes of your time," Baldwin said to his wife, then glanced at Adeline with the smallest apologetic tilt of his head. "Council matter. Nothing exciting." "Oakwood?" Adeline asked. Her father's expression flickered. Not quite surprise, more the particular caution of a man deciding how much a daughter needed to know before he decided it himself. We are looking into some reports. That's all it is for now. Perseus mentioned something at drills last week, Adeline said, about hunters not coming back. Perseus talks too much, Baldwin said, though without real heat. Perseus talks exactly as much as you allow him, Marigold said, rising and brushing the soil from her knee, which is a great deal considering how much you rely on him. Baldwin didn't argue that. He rarely argued with Marigold, not because he lacked opinions of his own, but because he had learned over a long marriage that hers were almost always the ones worth keeping. He offered his wife his arm. She took it. For a moment, the three of them stood together in the pale morning light. A king who carried the weight of a kingdom, a queen who carried the weight of everyone in it, and a princess who had not yet decided which weight she was meant to carry, only that she intended to carry it differently than either of them had. I want details, said Adeline, echoing her mother without quite meaning to. Marigold's mouth twitched, and Baldwin, catching it, sighed the particular sigh of a man who had long ago accepted that he was outnumbered in his own household and had stopped minding. 5 minutes, he said again to his wife. Then the two of them disappeared back through the archway, leaving Adeline alone among the moon blossoms, with the tree line waiting green, quiet on the horizon, holding whatever it was holding. Just a wild walk. That's it for now. It is a bit hard to build and read at the same time, but just rebuilding the perimeter. I'll do another one soon. Send this further back. That's it for today.